some statistics and some background with regard to KwaZulu-Natal as a province and some of the issues that we would like to dissect this afternoon. All right, let me start by introducing you to the parties that are in attendance here today. We have Women Forward, and they are represented by Nyangwini. EFF is Vusi Khoza. He's attending on behalf of EFF, and then the ANC is represented by Mdumiseni Ntuli, Democratic Alliance, Zwakele Mngango, and the IFP, Mtomuhle Kaula. These are our panelists this afternoon. Now, before we get into all of this, just a quick note, 48 political parties will be contesting elections in 2019, and of course 31 will be contesting the provincial election here in KwaZulu-Natal, of which these 5 will form a part of. Now, just to set the scene in terms of some of the issues that this province has been grappling with, we are going to just play a quick package because KwaZulu-Natal community members have identified unfulfilled government promises as the main contributor to the high rate of protests in various communities as the country heads to the May 8th poll. Now, the province has experienced numerous violent protests in recent months, and these occurred in several areas, including Mandeni, in Umzimkulu, and in Ndwedwe. And on the N3 between Moirava and Escort, residents also shut down these areas over lack of service delivery and unemployment challenges. And Fanele Mhlongo is our reporter, and she took a look at these different issues and how they have affected the province in recent months, and also looking at some of the political killings.
Service delivery protests, which were characterized by violence, has recently hit some parts of KwaZulu-Natal. Last month, Mandeni community members on the north coast took to the streets, closing off roads with burning tires and calling for the mayor's Pesihle Zulu to step down. 3 factories and 4 trucks were torched in the Isithebe area. Protesters also blockaded all entrance and exit roads to the town with burning tires, trees and broken bottles. In another protest, angry community members in Ndwedwe north of Durban closed off major routes with burning tires and stones, forcing schools to close last Monday. The residents were demanding the provision of water and other basic services. Locals in KwaZulu-Natal say it has become a trend for political leaders to come with empty promises during election campaigns. They say after the elections, government authorities forget about them.
Government do not fulfill the promise made. That is why the community embark on a protest. We promised school and clinics. In the build up to election, we are promised a number of things. After voting, nothing happens. Councillors need to work closely with the community. They need to give us a feedback on promise they make so that people will have an idea on what's going on, and people end up closing the roads.
In Umzimkulu in southern KwaZulu-Natal, the protest over service delivery, maladministration and corruption brought the town to a standstill last month. Protesters barricaded roads and stopped cars from entering and exiting the area, demanding the municipality be dissolved. The protest claimed the life of one person after taxi operators squared up to protesters, demanding that the roads be cleared for them to operate. The protesters refused, and taxi operators allegedly opened fire on the crowd. In another protest on the N3 between Moy River and Escorts in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, 7 trucks were set alight in March during protests over the alleged employment of foreign truck drivers, calling on authorities to provide them with services and ensure that they get jobs.
We want jobs. Government has allowed foreign nationals into our country who are taking our jobs. They get jobs because they are cheap labor and do not mind that. We must be given a first priority. Some people walk long distances to access transport. Some people are living in dilapidated houses. Government must help those people. We want houses. We have been promised RDP houses. They only build us toilets. We do have taps which do not have water.
A recent report by Municipal IQ indicates that in the first 3 months of 2019, there was an increase in process levels. Municipal IQ is a specialized local government data and intelligence organization that collects data on service delivery protests staged against municipalities. The report states that it's likely that protesters are making the most of the opportunity to draw politicians' attention to their grievances in the run-up to elections. Political analyst Dr. Setuleko Matebesi says there is a trend of violent protest leading up to the elections.
This is quite indicative of a trend which we have seen over a number of years with each election, where residents are using the election as a bargaining tool to try and close the gap with a distant and non-responsive government. We may say that it is irrational perhaps to do it that way, but for these residents, this is the only means of power that they have to try and draw the attention of the government.
In recent years, a number of political leaders have been killed in KwaZulu-Natal. These killings led to the appointment of the Mwirane Commission to probe political killings since 2011. Amongst the leaders that were killed in the province are former ANC Youth League Secretary General Cindy Somakaka, IFP Youth Brigade Chairperson in the Zululand District, Swiselo Dlamini, and former ANC Youth League Deputy Chairperson in the Emalahleni region, Wandile Ngubeni. The police task team appointed by Minister Peggy Cele to investigate political killings have made several arrests. The arrest of the Newcastle mayor
10 seconds, stand by.
In connection with Wandile Ngubeni's murder. Mahlaba has been released on 20,000 rand bail. I'm Fanele Mhlongo in Durban.
And that, of course, just sketches a background for us in terms of some of the issues that people are grappling with in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and talking about political killings, which is, of course, a subject of much debate, but also much consternation in KwaZulu-Natal. One has to point out that Abahlali Basem Jondolo, they have also indicated that more than 10 of their leaders have also been killed in what seems to be politically motivated killings in this province alone. And as far as those political killings go, of course, the Premier, Willis Mqunu, released in 2018 a report that was actually commissioned, and we had the Mwirane Commission sitting through, trying to sift through and find out exactly what was going on with regard to political killings in this province. More than 120 suspects have been arrested following this, and we understand there is work being done, but it is, of course, still a very worrying situation. And I thought what was rather poignant in the release of that report was the Premier saying that politicians in KwaZulu-Natal needed to take responsibility for this culture of intolerance. And I want to actually perhaps get in on that with the political leaders here this afternoon. And perhaps just to remind you of the parties who are represented here today, we have Women Forward, and they represented by Nana Ngubese, EFF, Vusikoza, Dumiseni Ntuli is here for the ANC, Zwakele Mwango for the DA, and Mtomuhle Kaula for the IFP. But let me start with the IFP on my extreme left with regard to political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. It's intra-party and it's also across the spectrum. So when the Premier says that political parties need to take responsibility for this culture, how do you respond to that?
Good day, Sakina, and good day to your listeners at home. Thank you for giving us this opportunity as the IFP. Of course, it is unfortunate that incidents like that are still happening in our country, because when this happened some decades ago, the IFP and the ANC were responsible enough to tackle this head on by, amongst other things, establishing committees the 3-a-side, the 5-a-side, the 10-a-side committees so as to stabilize the political climate of the time. And we want to believe as the IFP that those committees did achieve the purpose, because after that there was stability.
So do you think there's a difference between the political killings and the violence and intolerance that we saw back then to what is playing out today?
I was still continuing to say, of late we are now experiencing this outbreak again of political killings. It's unfortunate that we are experiencing a situation where comrades of the same party are being charged for allegations of having been involved in the killings of their own comrades. If you would look at this, up to this point, only leaders and members of one political party have up to now been arrested by the SAPS for having been involved in these killings. In the IFP, our hands are clean. In the IFP, what we are saying is the justice system, the security forces must do their work. They must uncover whatever is there so that at the end of the day, you don't have allegations sometimes which are not true, just flying around, which exacerbate the situation rather than calming the situation down. So we are saying, one, we want the SAPS to intensify their investigations and their arrests. And two, we want the justice system to also be effective. You don't want a situation whereby somebody is arrested and all of a sudden they get bail and they go back to the very same positions of leadership and become leaders whilst they are having at the back of them these allegations of continuing court cases. We are saying even the leaders that are involved, the political parties must be responsible. Remove them from power.
Let's go to the ANC. Mr. Kaula is saying that the IFP's hands are clean in this, but IFP members have also been killed. Let's not forget that in this province. But your time is over, Mr. Kaula. I want to hear from the ANC now with regard to taking responsibility for these political killings.
Well, thanks, Sakina. Good afternoon to you, my fellow panelists and the listeners here and at home. I think firstly, let's welcome the opportunity to exchange ideas about the challenges facing our province. The question of the killings, which many other people have defined as political killings, a definition that as the African National Congress we've contested, because are these killings informed by ideological differences? What underpins the definition of a political killing? What do you mean when you say it's political? Because we have to distinguish between the killing that involves politicians and the killing that is as a consequence of differences in terms of the political and ideological orientation of people. And that is where the ANC has always been departing. But beside that, let me then address the question of how we've been dealing with this matter. It was the ANC leadership that called on the ANC-led government to appoint a commission of inquiry with an intention to ensure that we do not only speculate, but we acquire a more scientific and deeper insight and understanding of what is it that is really underpinning the killings that were going on in our province. Of course, it is quite correct that we have had our own comrades being accused, and we've congratulated the criminal justice system for being merciless and approaching this matter without any due consideration to political affiliation, without any due consideration to whether you are a leader in any sphere of government. That is what we want the justice system to do. But of course, as you know, many of the comrades who are implicated have only been implicated. Nobody has yet been convicted. We believe that at an appropriate time, the justice system will indeed go deeper and ensure that everybody has an understanding beyond reasonable doubt whether or not the accused are actually accused for what they've been for the crime that they've committed. At this stage, the ANC believes, first and foremost, we are the architects of the current constitutional dispensation, as a consequence of which we adopted a constitution that says everybody must be presumed innocent until proven otherwise. But as a national liberation movement, we have had to say, is that enough for those who are charged with the responsibility to lead the program of changing the lives of our people for the better? And we said, no, that's not enough. And that's when we took a decision that says, once any of our comrades is accused of having been involved in what is called serious crime, that comrade will have to step aside from the responsibilities that he or she is deployed by the movement. in order to ensure that we do not send mixed signal to society, where you have a heavy accusation of having been involved in the killing or the rape of a human being, and yet you are expected to discharge your responsibility as a public representative or as a leader of the ANC in a manner that must inspire hope and confidence.
So are
to
you any
everybody.
wiser at this stage about the root causes of these political killings, regardless of how you want to, define or characterize
course.
what may constitute a political killing? For the purposes of this discussion, as we all understand what political killings are, what are the root causes as per whatever work or research you have done?
Well, of course, let me not contest the definition. I was just explaining it to give you a context, because it's important that we must call things for what they are so that we understand how to deal with them. But the point is that when the Morana Commission of Inquiry concluded this investigation, it pointed to a number of weaknesses. One of them was that there were problems with what is called SAM processes, the process of supply chain in various municipalities across our provinces. It said that there were internal challenges in the political parties, and it called on all political parties, not just the ANC, to ensure that they improve the quality of leadership in various municipalities, because there was an insinuation that some of these killings may be as a consequence of controversies and fights over who should control certain tenders and certain transactions that are taking place in various municipalities. So the Commission said political parties must engage their own members and ensure that there is a clear and a distinct responsibility performed by those who are employed by various municipalities as compared to the responsibility of those who are politicians.
Okay, if that's the level of accountability we are hearing thus far. Let's hear from the Democratic Alliance.
Yeah, thank you, Sakina. Firstly, let me greet the audience and listeners at home, and to you and the panel here. I think firstly, one, I agree with Mpemba on the fact that we have to be clear in terms of a definition, what it is that is political killings. But I think he's massaging the reality here, because the truth is corruption. What came out from Morani Commission was exactly what we've been saying as a DA in the province. It's for that reason we're putting pressure on the Premier to do investigation on these killings in the province, because we're of the view that part of the problem is around corruption in government, especially at a municipal level, where you find that councillors believe they have a say on procurement processes, and which lead to a point where whistleblowers that are not protected currently by the ANC is the fact that most of them are getting killed. So if you look at the trend of these killings, you will realize that those who are being killed are those who are exposing corruption in the province, can't be at municipality level or in different areas. But the critical problem is transparent. This is why we are saying you must be transparent on the procurement processes, because fail to do that, if communities doesn't know the process of awarding tenders and this chronism system that has been entrenched by the ANC, where you find that tenders are given to the elite within the ANC, have caused a problem where, as my colleague from IFF said, where you find that ANC has become a common denominator on these killings. Because if you look at the trend, you will see that ANC is always involved in this kind of killings. It tells you that the problem is within the ANC. Up until ANC admit the problem that they're having in terms of corruption, where you'll find that leaders are not deployed when they are corrupt, but they are sent to jail, because the criminals who are leaders today are prioritized to go to parliament in different positions instead of going to jail. That is why we are saying we need to ensure that we protect whistleblowers. On top of that, we say those who are found to be corrupt must be sent to jail with a minimum of 15 years sentence, because that's the only way you can show the country that you are dealing decisively with corruption. And because if you have corruption, you are stealing from the poor. As you can see right now, you can see most of the municipalities in KZN are failing to deliver services because politicians are the ones who are benefiting from public funds.
All right, I want to hear the EFF as well.
Now, thank you very much, Sakina. Greetings to the listeners and the fellow panelists. On the issue of political violence, the political violence of the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, was more what you would call political, because it was intra-party. Now, the latest killings are basically either the ANC in the main and the IFP, councillors and officials killing each other. Why? They would believe that if you become a councillor, you get proximity to state resources, you can steal and enrich yourself. And should anybody be an opposition to you, they must be murdered. It is basically on the corruption. But let us begin to look at this violence that is here now. We cannot begin to say there is violence, there is political killings. When we went to Mwerane Commission as the EFF, we said the Mwerane Commission was a waste of money. Waste of money because it was there to probe the known fact that there's ANC corruption, they're killing each other because Baba Nguguti who wants to eat what when. It's about eating amongst themselves. Therefore, they want to eat each other for them to eliminate each other and be able to access resources. But let's talk about how these people get killed. They don't get stabbed by a knife. They get shot by heavy, high caliber weapons. And where are these weapons coming from? These weapons are coming from the IFP and the ANC from the 80s. The IFP had what we call self-protection unit. ANC had what we call self-defense unit. They were armed by both Umkhonto weSizwe and the Boers at the time so that they can ferment black-on-black violence. Then what happened to those firearms? They were never collected. They were stashed somewhere. The IFP and the ANC must tell us what happened to those guns. But let me tell you, those guns have resurfaced and they've been cleaned through the private security companies. Most of these bodyguards that are guarding these so-called honorables here are hitmen by night and bodyguards by day. Those firearms are sitting with those private security companies owned in the main by the IFP and owned in the main by the ANC. It is the same firearms that kill people in the taxi industry, and no one seems to be doing anything about it. Lastly, as EFF, we propose abolition of tenders. You know why? Because it is tenders that have corrupted the government to the core. Before the ANC came into power, there were no tenders. People worked directly for government. But because the ANC here and its cronies saw an opportunity to loot the coffers of the state, they introduced tenders. Why we say abolish tenders? One, you will cut down corruption. Number two, those people that are working for these corrupt tenderpreneurs will then be able to be employed by the state directly and get money, decent salaries, and also benefits. Not this thing here. I'm telling you, if tenders are not abolished, the state is going to be collapsed. Now, as we're speaking, the majority of municipalities, both run by the ANC and the IFP, are under administration because they've looted the money before even the end of financial year term. I'm talking about the Msunduzis, the Moimpo Fanas, and a whole lot of them that are even run by the IFP for that matter.
Well, let's come to Women Forward on this very serious matter of political killings, and very often the women's voices are not heard in this, and there have been women who have been killed as well. So what is your take on this matter?
I would like to greet everyone who is here and thank you for the opportunity. As you can see, if Women Forward was not here, there would be no women in the panel, which is indicative of what is happening in the political space in South Africa and everywhere else for that matter. But talking about the political killings, let me go to the center of all of this. Here we're talking about taxpayers' money. Taxpayers' money being the money that was meant to service the communities. Very few of those projects ever reach the communities at the level where the projects are supposed to happen. I would like to agree with the EFF representative here to say we need to abolish tenders so that we have systems that make sure that we diffuse power from the top, because it's the power at the top that makes people feel they have access to our coffers. Now, once you change the model of governing, which is what Women Forward is proposing, make sure that we have effective community structures that are going to make sure that the projects are happening at the level where they are meant to happen, and that is where most of the women are going to get involved. Therefore, then we are actually working with the people who are going to make sure that everyone gets what is due to them at community level. And as we're going to be even moving on further into your municipal elections and all of those things, we're going to be making sure that the language of community development is the most primary one here, because I think the pyramid that is actually done through the power that the men hold at the top, because they're competing, their killings are about competition, who gets what. But once you take the very same amount of money and you diffuse that money at community level, then you remove the levels of violence that you actually see. It's women who are losing their children, but nobody's actually asking questions. But I think it's important for us to actually change the paradigm of how we govern in South Africa, so that accountability happens at community level, other than people killing themselves at the top.
And I suppose if one were to extend that, this whole definition of political killings and what's actually happening in that regard, I pointed earlier to the Abahlali Basem Jondolo and the land question, and the fact that there are killings happening with regard to that as well. But before I get into that, I think I want to just get clarity on the point that the EFF made about arms that have now been cleansed through the private security industry that are being used in these political assassinations and other forms of political violence. Let me give the ANC and the IFP an opportunity to respond to that. IFP.
Thank you, Sakina. These false accusations are really very, very reckless. There is not a single security company in this province and in this country which Mr. Khoza can claim that it's owned by somebody who is IFP. Not a single one.
But he's not necessarily saying they are owned. He's saying they are cleansing these weapons.
What he's saying is
that.
These security companies are owned by IFP people who are former SPUs. There is nothing like that. And secondly, Sakina.
That's not what I said.
And secondly, Sakina, you see, there is not a single municipality again in this province which is under administration because there are problems of finances that have been caused by the IFP in that municipality. There is Mtobatoba. The reason why it is under administration is because of the instability in council, where you find that there is a deadlock in the numbers, and as a result, some councillors decide to walk out when decisions have been taken. In all the instances where there is administration in the IFP-run municipalities, it's because of the instability which is caused by deadlock in numbers, not in the issue of corruption. The IFP is known, Sakina, to be very, very harsh in dealing with people who are corrupt. We deal with that spot on.
Let me ask the question differently. So, do you agree with his assertion that there were self-defense units that were heavily armed?
We know that in the country there were self-defense units. We know that there were self-protection units, not heavily armed. Not heavily armed.
So they were not armed?
There were self-defense units and there were self-protection units.
But were they armed? Were they armed?
Of course. No, they were not heavily armed.
Never mind heavily. Were they armed?
Yes.
Well, the self-protection units were not armed. I cannot speak on behalf of the SDUs because the SDUs were ANC manufactured. But the self-protection units, if we can go back to how they established, during the times of violence, you know that in the townships, there were instances where people felt that they were unsafe and they wanted their streets to be made safe. It's like what you have today where you have got the committees that are working with the SAPS. It were people who were working in conjunction with the security forces of the time to try and ensure that there are no people who attack people unnecessarily.
Okay, so the IFP denying this, saying that they did not have arms. They did not have arms. That's what you say.
There was even a truth commission in this country which went through those issues.
Okay.
And
can we remind you?
Ukoza at the time was in the ANC. He never went to the truth commission to say what he's saying.
Can we remind you? Specifics, Sakin. Can we give this lying honorable member specifics? Because he's lying. Can we give him specifics because he is lying?
Okay.
Yes. Sakina, I'm disappointed that this honorable member of parliament comes here and he lies. Here's the thing.
Can I be
Does
protected?
he know a person
Can I be protected?
Yeah, you are
say
protected.
that I'm lying.
Let's first hear what he claims you are lying
in Parliament,
about.
it's even
This is not Parliament, yeah. Sakina,
Let's hear what you are supposedly lying about.
I'm sure he will deny a Philip Powell, a warlord. He says those self-protection units were working with the security forces at the time. The apartheid government Abo Malan were arming the IFP through Philip Powell. And Arms Kaiche was discovered. Philip Powell was granted amnesty and he walked away. It was agreed. He went through the Truth Commission. They had a mandreni where they were training warlord. The ANC will confirm and the IFP will confirm that they were killing each other, being armed by the Boers, so that they ferment black on black violence.
For now, Mr. Kaula is saying there were no arms. Let's hear the ANC. Were those
Sakina,
self-defense units, were they armed?
I think, Sakina, let me start by saying one of the pillars of our struggle as the ANC was the armed struggle. And the armed struggle meant that you needed to have soldiers to work for the National Democratic Revolution that we won in 1994. And clearly, everybody who lives in South Africa or anywhere else who's familiar with the concept of the armed struggle will know that the armed struggle means that you establish soldiers and you empower them with the arm in order to confront what was obviously a very violent enemy, which was declared by the United Nations as committing crime against humanity. So there's no question about that. But I think we must not deviate from the essence of the issue. What Mr. Koza is saying, which I think is an issue that he has to clarify, not only to us but to the people of KwaZulu-Natal, and where he has evidence to put it on the table. He argues that all security companies in the province are companies that are using firearms or arms or guns that were cleansed from the past, and these bodyguards of many comrades who have bodyguards, correctly so, are being used in the evening in order to assassinate other people. Now, that is a serious charge. That's right. And I think it's important that even when we are in the debate and as desperate as we are to win the elections and finding it impossible to do it, because it's important that even in our quest to win support and lead South Africa and KwaZulu-Natal, but we must not deviate from what is correct and what is acceptable. We know that the EFF is generally a populist organization, a demagogy that depends on populism, and it depends on quite a lot of impossible commitments that it makes to the people of KwaZulu-Natal and the people of South Africa. But I think it's important that in this case, if the EFF has got knowledge, substantive knowledge with evidence, that there are companies, security companies, whether employed by the state or providing security to any of our comrades, who are involved in the killing during the day, during the evening, and guarding the comrades during the day. We need that evidence. Okay. We need that evidence because those people will have to be taken into task and they must be arrested. And it must not be a campaign tool. This is a sensitive matter.
It's a fair call that you make on the EFF, but as far as you are concerned, as the government, the ruling party in government of the day, what are you going to do about these very serious accusations and assertions that are being placed on the table? What are you going to do about it?
Part of what we're doing already is to say to the EFF here now that when you have this information you are claiming to have at your disposal, be part of responsible South Africans. Put that information before the law enforcement agency so that proper investigation can be conducted and those who are involved be arrested and be incarcerated. And that is the point that we're making. But of course, I know this is just a wild allegation. It's a wild allegation which sounds very attractive. And what makes it sound attractive is the fact that the majority of people who were killed happen to belong to the African National Congress. And it's easy that without any shred of evidence, as a populist organization, you can stand on the podium and say, I know it all and I know what is happening. But when you are called upon to provide evidence, which is what we must depend on, that evidence will never be made available. I'm sure if you ask him here now, he would not point to any specifics that can help the criminal justice system. He says he will.
And I want you to wrap this up because I don't necessarily want to belabor this. I want to move on to other points as well. But just to wrap it up.
He has agreed to say that they had soldiers, they armed them. So they were armed. They've never declared those firearms. What happened to those arms cache that they had, that he has admitted?
He's asking questions.
That's one. Number two, or we know that as recently Minister Peggy Cele, talking on political violence, he gave specific in terms of the security companies that are being probed, the number of guns that have been collected, and the people that have been arrested. The majority of the people involved in political killings are from those security companies. It's there.
All right.
It's public knowledge.
I tell you what, I want to move on to other issues because we can sit and talk about these political killings all day. And before I go to the floor, I just want to touch on another issue, as I said earlier, about Abahlali Basem Jondolo, the housing issue, and even people getting killed over the land question. And I've got all your manifestos here, by the way, and we actually do read through them. We actually do read your manifestos and the promises that you make. So coming to Women Forward on this question, you're saying that you want to address the question of land ownership by marginalized women and families and focusing on environmental stability for community well-being. Let's talk about this question of the land, of housing. Inkatha Freedom Party, pity they, oh, you are here. Sorry, I'm thinking NFP. You are here because
there's no correlation.
No, I know there isn't. I want to talk about the Ingonyama Trust as well, and that sort of land ownership and how does it work for the people. So let's just quickly run through that before I take some questions from the floor. Women first, Women Forward. Women first too.
On the issue of land, we all are aware that women battle to own land, particularly in traditional areas. We have actually become aware that even when women want to rent, to lease, they have to come with male relatives to come and lease land, which we think is totally unconstitutional. Now, what is important here is that when Women Forward articulates this position, we are saying we want every woman in rural area to own at least an acre. We are going to form partnerships with various arms that are going to ensure that we actually give the land to women in their own name, because it's very important for women to own something. That will start dealing with the issues of high inequality in this country. Land ownership in this country is one of the biggest issues that has not been resolved. Now, when you give women land, they not only till the land, where they actually make sure there is food on the table, they will actually make sure that environmentally that place is pristine. It will also offer opportunities for the jobs for the marginalized women in not just rural areas, but also in peri-urban areas. Now, what is important here is that as women own the land, we are beginning to cut in the non-ownership of land, not only by the women themselves, but also as Africans in general. And we are going to open the path for that to make sure that it actually happens. There are farmers we are discussing with who are actually willing to actually work with us on the project of allowing women to own land even where they are actually working. So there is opportunity that actually lies in us making sure that land ownership starts making a bite to the people who actually don't own anything in this country.
The Democratic Alliance on this particular matter of the land question, and as you heard here from Women Forward with regard to women still needing to go with the male relative in order for them to access, their constitutional right, because this is a constitutional imperative that we are all equal before the law of this land. So what's your take on this matter in this province?
Sakina, you're quite correct. That is why we are saying the issue of land reform must remain the issue of justice and jobs for growth. Why we're saying that is currently you see government spending a lot of money, for example, on security for ministers, more than what we spend on land reform. Now, also you'll realize that there's a lot of red tape when it comes to land owned by government. As you correctly said, Abahlali Jondolo always calling government to provide land, and the municipalities have land and government own land, but the question is why don't allow communities to have access to this land, also in the aim to try to integrate communities, because we're coming from a system where we were separated from each other as different communities, and is an opportunity right now in our government to integrate communities, to come together in cities. Now, we believe that it is possible, but the challenge is the political will. The ANC have failed to use our constitution to really implement what is required and what people need to actually have access to land. But quickly, they want to move away and change the discussion and talk about amending constitution, which is not really the problem. Our constitution is not a problem. The problem is the political will within the ANC. That is why the DA will never accept the move by the ANC and the EFF to quickly amend the constitution just because they believe it's a shortcut to exploitation of land without the compensation. We believe land is available from government. Government must avail land for poor people in this country and able to build more houses for our people.
All right. With regard to just a point of clarity on the access, access to which land in particular are you referring to?
As I said to you, there's a bigger portion of land owned by government. So that land should be availed to our communities because land is available. It's not available. You go to cities, land is available. It must be given to our communities.
Let me come to the IFP on this question. In 2012, the Ingonyama Trust owned 32% of the land in KwaZulu-Natal. So listening to what Women Forward is saying, listening to what the DA is saying, what is your solution to this land question and access to not just land, but housing as well?
Thanks, Sakina. Let's go back and say two very important aspects of colonization. One, they wanted land, and two, they wanted our wealth. So it's very important that land must be returned to the people. But you remember, Sakina, that the wars that were fought then, when 1879 came, people of KwaZulu were defending land. When Piet Retief visited King Tingani Mkungundlovu, he wanted land. And he did not visit the Kaula family. He did not visit the Sakina family. He visited the homestead of King Tingani because he wanted the land of KwaZulu. And what as the IFP are saying is when land is returned, it must be returned to the authorities that are Amakos. But number one, let's applaud Umdwana. There is no other king in South Africa that can claim and its people to be having land. Umdwana in 1994. Because Umdwana has always known that land is very important, protected the land that belongs to the Zulu people by passing Ingonyama Trust. Ingonyama Trust is not land that belongs to the king. It is land that belongs to the Zulu people under the custodianship of the king and Amakos. So what is the IFP are saying? No, that is number one. What is the IFP are saying is let us improve on the Ingonyama Trust. If there are flaws, because Umtwana has repeatedly said this, that the next step with the Ingonyama Trust was to have people being given a leeway of how they can acquire now the title deeds. That is the next step. You can't say, no, because this thing, people are complaining in Umgababa, because it's only Umgababa, then you throw away the baby with the bathwater and everything. No, let's improve. But secondly, as the IFPR are saying is on the issue of land, we need to be very careful. Audit land and find out who owns what. There is land that is owned by government, and people are not saying anything. They just talk about the Ingonyama Trust land. Let's take that land which is owned by the government itself and give it to municipalities so that municipalities can build houses for the people. And three, let's audit land that is owned by people who are not staying in South Africa. And lastly, what the IFP is saying is, let's expropriate land but with compensation. The mistake that the ANC government has done is to take compensation as purchasing. Compensation and purchasing are two different things. When you purchase, you go to the value of the land, you do all those things. But when you compensate, compensation is not purchasing. What the government has done wrongly is to interpret compensation as purchasing.
Okay, so many people are questioning the constitutionality of how the Ingonyama Trust actually operates, and listening to what Women Forward have said about where females still need to bring a male relative along in order for them to have access to land. Respond to that, whether it's in line with the constitution.
Let me address that. It's a myth. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. I stay in the rural area. All these people here, most of them stay in rural areas. NC colleagues, they will
Nana's
tell
eyes
you.
practically popped out here when you said that.
No. NC colleagues here stay there. IFP colleagues, CFF, DA colleagues, they stay in rural areas. They know that there is nothing like when you are a female, you go to any course, you have to have the company of a male. There's nothing like that.
Nana?
It's propaganda.
Nana?
You know, I've heard this from experience myself. I live in Pietermaritzburg. We wanted to acquire land for some of our female staff. We went to see Inkosi, I won't name him here. We went there and we did everything we're supposed to do. He asked me where my ring was. I don't wear a ring, unfortunately. And he said I must come with my husband for me to come and negotiate space for my staff. So we could not. And it's reality that I'm talking about. I'm not making a story.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we have to take a break. We're going to come back. The EFF, I know I haven't heard you. I haven't heard the ANC. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll also take some questions from the audience here. And we are coming to you from the Esibabini Community Hall this afternoon in the Umzube municipality in KwaZulu-Natal. And thank you so much for those of you listening across the country as well, enjoying the debate. Glad you are. And of course, we'll take this break, come back, take questions. And this is, of course, also being live streamed on SABC News Online, or you can go to SAfm.co.za, and after the fact, you who are here can also go and watch this debate on those various SABC platforms. But let's take that quick break.
My name is Dr. Bongenkosi Blades, the Minister of Transport. Millions of South Africans will take to the nation's roads this Easter weekend. Will you be amongst them? If so, ensure that your vehicle is roadworthy. Adhere to the speed limit. Avoid driving under the influence of alcohol. Avoid using cell phone while driving. Buckle up. Take regular breaks. Pedestrians must cross streets at marked intersections. Arrive alive.
Africa's biggest running event, the All Mutual Two Oceans Marathon, is turning 50. To celebrate this milestone marathon event, Two Oceans is hosting its biggest expo to date at the CTICC from 17 to 19 April. Get there early, enter the draw, and you could run away with a brand new car. The keys to this new car could be yours on 20 April, thanks to the Two Oceans Marathon Initiative, with proceeds benefiting their charities and beneficiaries. Tickets are available at the expo and cost 50 Rand each. The time is now.
Top Billing and Mela fans, listen up. Due to popular demand, we've made some changes to our magazine time slots. Top Billing moves back to Saturday nights at 6 p.m. with a repeat on Sunday afternoons at 12 p.m. Mela has moved from their 2:30 p.m. time slot on Sunday afternoons to 5:30 p.m. on Sundays immediately after our Bollywood movie. Make that mental note. Top Billing Saturdays at 6 p.m. and Mela Sundays at 5:30 p.m. on SABC 3.
Join SABC Sports this Sunday on Laduma as National First Division team Real Kings FC fight with all they have to escape the relegation zone against Mbombela United on SABC 1 at 3 p.m. Soccer Zone concludes the weekend with soccer highlights on Monday at 10 p.m. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sports for the love of the game.
Good health is not a destination. It's a journey for life.
It starts with using condoms consistently every time you have sex.
It starts with reducing the number of sexual partners.
It starts with knowing your HIV and TB status.
It starts with knowing that HIV is preventable.
It starts with knowing that TB is curable.
It starts with taking HIV treatment if positive.
It starts with knowing that ARVs are the only way to control HIV. U equals U. Undetectable viral load means HIV is untransmittable. Get screened and tested for HIV and TB today and start treatment immediately. This message is brought to you by the National Department of Health. A long and healthy life for all South Africans.
The clock is ticking towards the finish line and the going gets tough in the Premier League.
That should seal the points for Liverpool, who will go back to the top of the Premier League tonight.
Every match is crucial regardless of current position.
Reality kicks in as others face relegation. The bottom teams continue to fight for their survival. Those in the middle aim for the highest possible finish. Meanwhile, the top 6 teams duke it out for that elusive Champions League spot.
It is the survival of the fittest. The race is on for title contenders Liverpool and Manchester City. It is going down to the wire.
It's Sané through a crowd of players. Jubilant reaction from Pep Guardiola. One born of relief.
And the finish line is on an uphill. It is the final stretch. Catch the Premier League action on SABC 3 every Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Brought to you by SABC Sport for the love of the game.
No, I Temba. Not again.
But I'm trying, my love.
Well, you need to get help.
Are you struggling to get things started in your relationship? At Men's Clinic, we have the expertise to help you reignite the spark.
SMS help to 32110 or send a please call me to 072 315 2574.
Woo! Yes! That's my man.
T's and C's apply. SMS's cost £1.
Safari Live is back on SABC3 to cure your Sunday blues. Instead of worrying about Monday, relax in the company of the mesmerizing wildlife of the Masai Mara in Kenya and our very own Western Kruger. As the sun sets on your weekend, join us on a journey through the African wild and chat to our guides in real time. Kick the Sunday blues and hop on board the world's biggest game drive this Sunday evening at 6:30 p.m. on SABC3.
All right, and welcome back to SE Banini Community Hall in Umzube Municipality. And of course, this is where we say goodbye to our SAFM listeners, and we continue on SABC News online and on SAFM.co.za. You can actually live stream this particular broadcast. All right, just continuing with the debate, and of course, we were talking about the land question before we went to the break, and I want to get the views of the EFF and the ANC on this matter as well. EFF.
Thank you. We just want to say that I just want to state that we as the EFF are the ones that actually brought a motion of changing the constitution of the country, section 25, so that we are able to expropriate all land without compensation. And indeed, we are forging ahead in ensuring that this year, in this lifetime, that constitution is changed and our people are able to access land. How so? By ensuring that all land is expropriated and put under the custodianship of the state for equitable redistribution. How are we going to cover the issue of women? EFF is very clear on its manifesto that once land has been expropriated by the state, when it comes to land usage, we propose three types of land usage. There could be more, but one is for massive industrialization. So there should be land for industries to create job and fight unemployment. The second stage is that one of agriculture in order to ensure food security. And the third one is for residential purposes. All land that will then be allocated, 50% of it will be allocated to young people, particularly women. That's how we look at the issue of land. But whose land is this anyway? This land belongs to the indigenous African people. On the Ingonyama Trust land, let's make no mistake, we can't be clapping and saying one particular leader must then be congratulated for that land. That is state land. For historical purposes, prior to the elections in 1994, it was 1993, when the IFP refused to participate in the elections of 1994. One of their demands was that all land that was under the erstwhile KwaZulu government must be put under a trust. And indeed, it was a compromise position. But as EFF, we're not worried about that. We're not talking about that land. Why? It is state land. It's just an administrative arrangement, that Ngonyama Trust. So the land we are talking about is land that is owned by multinationals, large tracts of lands that are owned by individuals, by companies, etc. All that land must be expropriated, put under the custodianship of the state without compensation for equitable redistribution.
The ANC, as the party that is leading government, you being accused of not providing people with access to land and not providing adequate housing for the people in the province.
Well, sure, that's correct. I think, Sakina, part of the reason why the ANC will be accused of that, firstly, let me say, the land question, as you can see how we articulate on it, is a very emotive issue. When we had a democratic breakthrough in 1994, a part of the central mandate of the then government of national unity was to consolidate and entrench democracy in our country. And that meant you needed to avoid taking some of the radical approach in dealing with some of the questions that could have entrenched a fear in society of a certain racial groupings being targeted by the democratic state. And that is why part of the policies that were put in place at that time was what is popularly known as the willing buyer, willing seller policy. And the intention there was an acceptance that all South Africans are committed to this new project, and therefore everybody will understand that they will have to make certain contributions in order to ensure that there is a transformation of our country, and that trajectory is carried in a responsible manner and in a manner that unites all our people. But of course, 25 years later, we have learned from that journey, and I think we can speak with authority and confidence because we have walked into that path and we understand what were difficulties and challenges. And that is why the 54th National Conference of the ANC then came to the determination that it was no longer possible for us to proceed in this way, and we needed a different approach and a radical approach. 25 years after democracy, the pace of transformation in general, the question of land redistribution in particular, has been one of the thorny issues, and hence the process then began in government, in parliament, which is supported by most political parties except one or two, that one, we need to establish a responsible mechanism through which you can expropriate land without compensation. And part of that avenues was the amendment of the Constitution, which is the Section 25 of the Constitution. Now that exercise needed to be carried out. Of course, I know the EFF would want to claim that as their own victory. But in essence, that resolution about the radical approach is a resolution that emanated from the ANC and the ANC League. He was part of the ANC, you have heard that. And of course, part of what he would be doing wherever he goes is largely going to be what he has learned and assimilated from the ANC.
Because
and you wouldn't expect...
because you failed to do it.
You wouldn't expect much of a differences between what they would be putting forward and what the ANC does, except the degree to which there is responsibility in that articulation. And that is where you would find the deviation between what we are proposing as because we want this to be done in a way that is accepted in terms of our constitutional democracy, responsible but unite our people.
Accepted by whom? Because, you know, when you talk about land expropriation without compensation, black people are today being moved off mineral-rich land to other areas
with their blessings,
without being compensated for the land on which they live. Is that not expropriation without compensation?
No, I don't think that is expropriation without compensation.
What is it?
Forced removal.
Well, it's forced removal. It's clearly forced removal, which is done by certain people who are doing that. The issue of the land expropriation without compensation has to find expression in our legal regime. It can't be an exercise of a certain few people who decide on a certain day that we want these people to move away from this area.
Well, for it to find expression means that it needs to be legislated by
That's
the
correct.
legislators of this land.
That's correct.
And that simply requires a willingness to accept certain things for what they are and legislate accordingly.
You are quite correct. And that is why the process of legislation entails, in our view, the process of that legislation entails, in our view, improving the current formulation in our constitution through an amendment of Section 25.
I still want to know, when you remove black communities from land from which they could have benefited, what do we call that, as apart from the obvious forced removal?
Removed by
you do not believe that those communities should be compensated because this is their land?
Removed by who, where, Sakin?
Well, whether they are removed by government, whether they're removed by private companies who are allowed to do that because they have been given all sorts of rights to do that.
The question, Sakina, is who is removing them from where? And how have they occupied that land in the first place? Because the reason why you must have a clearly articulated legal regime is to avoid what the EFF encourages, that people must wake up and go anywhere and occupy land. Because if you go and wake up and occupy land without a clearly defined regulation, that is actually anarchy, and we can't allow that. Let's have a regulation that is understood, inserted in our constitution, protected by our law, that our people can use whenever anybody decide to come and say you must vacate a certain land.
Okay, and I know the audience is chomping at the bit. Where's the mics? But let me just, as you are also, dying to weigh in very briefly, minute, to respond to this.
No, I wanted to bring up the Kolobeni issue. The Kolobeni issue brings in the issue of communities who have actually been bulldozed to give up what is theirs by the big multinationals. And what has not happened there is a shared agreement between those multinationals and the communities, which is why Women Forward is saying we need a shared vision about what needs to happen in communities. Because what has actually happened right now is that the communities own the land. Obviously, they're the ones who decide who they can give the license to. But right now, they are being forced to do what they don't want because the multinationals want what is underneath the ground, and the government is not helping there because the communities now feel marginalized. And I think it's important for us to actually make sure that when we deal with developments in the areas where people are, and they are very passionate about their land and their own resources, they become part and parcel of the discussions that move on to actually see change in their own areas, not to be bullied by government and also not to be bullied by the multinationals.
A minute.
Sakina, we know that our people are being forcefully removed from their land because multinationals, with the help of the current ANC government, particularly the current minister, Gwede Mantashe, I'm talking about Matsegan in Richards Bay, I'm talking about Kolobeni. Why? It's because they've got shares in these mines. They want to bully our people and steal from them. Here's a solution that the EFF proposes. Our 7 cardinal pillars. Pillar number 1, expropriate all land without compensation. Pillar number 2, nationalize all mines so that our people can directly benefit for those minerals that are being forcefully removed for. We know who's removing them.
The Democratic Alliance?
Sakina, it's very simple. 94, we were voting for freedom. 2019, we have to vote for survival in our future. Now, the question of land is about ownership. Now, current government is forcefully removing people because they've got no title deed, they've got no ownership of this land they reside in. That is why we are saying we cannot allow and support the ANC and EFF on their move to take land away from people and put in the hands of government, the state which is very corrupt. And the same EFF is saying the ANC is corrupt, but still you want to take the land and give it to the state. How much corruption you will see there? People will never get land under the government. That is why we are saying to rescue our country, people have to vote for a DA, which is clearly saying land must be owned by people, not the state.
IFP?
Thanks, Sakina. Sakina, the Ingonyama Trust Act is an act of parliament, passed around March, April 1994. And the agreement that was reached, facilitated by Professor Okumo of Kenya, which was reached between Dr. Mandela, Mr. de Klerk, and Prince Buthelezi, was reached about 8-10 days before elections, long after the Ingonyama Trust Act had been passed. So, of course, I must not mislead the people. The agreement between the 3 leaders was about the role of traditional leaders in the new dispensation.
All right, I'm going to come and ask you to hold on to all your residual. ANC, you want your minute too? Okay, I tell you, you factored into subsequent answers. Okay, let's take some questions from the floor, and we start on that end, and then we'll come through to all of you. Sir, your name and your question and who it's directed to.
Thank you very much, Sakina. Greetings to you, and greetings to you, Sakina, and greetings to the Provincial Secretary of the ruling party and others. Sakina, firstly, it's a comment. That one, on the issue of political killings, it's very disappointing that the IFP, it speaks as if only people that are accused or are being questioned are people of the ANC. On the killing of the IFP Youth Brigade in the northern of KwaZulu-Natal, IFP members were taken for questioning. On the killing of the IFP councillor in Wadogoza, IFP members were taken for questioning. So they must take that into consideration. On the issue of land without compensation, one, the DA as well, I think Uzwagelezi, as he's here, is being accused of acquiring land illegally in Zululand himself. In Wanongoma is accused. That is corruption because he acquired that land illegally as well. My question is directed to the provincial secretary of the ANC. One, I think maybe if the provincial secretary of the ANC can be able to clarify us as members of the ANC and take us into confidence on how the African National Congress is dealing with the matter of killings within the province of KwaZulu-Natal. The second one is on the issue of land. We are young people of the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and we want to clearly understand how the ANC is going to assist young people in benefiting from the land that is going to be owned by the state. Thank you.
I think he answered your first question with regard to how the ANC was dealing with the question of the political killings, but I'll put the other question to him about youth benefiting. All right, let's take a question this side.
Thank you, SK. I just want to begin where you began earlier on about the political killings. Actually, this is a very, very sensitive issue. And unfortunately, most of the panelists failed to address this issue, although Zwageret made an attempt. The political killings that is taking place in our province cannot just be looked at as a matter of corruption. I think the problem here is our weak criminal justice system. If one looks at the Zondo Commission, I mean, people are providing evidence there. In this week alone, we heard that most of the senior officials in the criminal justice system were barred from doing their job properly, to prosecute people who were allegedly involved in fraud and corruption and many other cases.
I'm going to have to push you, unfortunately. What is the question and to who is it directed?
The direct question here, SK, is that for many, many years now, the ANC has failed to deliver services to the people of KZN efficiently, effectively, and economically.
Question?
And this has been evidenced by a number of public service delivery protests which ended or which used to end in violence.
That's a long preface. Where's the question?
There's no question.
Question, please.
The question is, in this issue, what will the DA do to reverse this situation that the people of KwaZulu-Natal in particular are facing and the people of South Africa in general? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a question on the other side.
Shakina, thanks for the opportunity. Let me greet everyone who's present here today and all political parties. My name is Chigam Tetwa. I just want to clarify one thing. As it has been mentioned here that there is a challenge with regards to Umgababa. Umgababa is not under Ingonyama Trust Act. Instead, Ingonyama, Umgababa is under Umnini Act Trust. So these are two separate entities. So I wanted to clear that up. So my question is going to be posed to the member of the IFP, Mr. Mtomuhle Kaula. What is the IFP take with regards to the justice system, since there is always a quick release of politicians after they've been arrested? That's my first question.
Can we limit it to one, please, so that we can take more? We'll come back for another round of questions. All right?
Thank you, Shakina. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Let me greet you, Sakina, and the panel in the front. My name is Mchokozisi from the EFF. I live in this municipality in Ward 20. My question is directly to the EFF provincial chairperson. Vuskoza. On the issue of political killings, the majority of the people who have been shot at, you will find that when the police go there, they will find that the ammunition that was used at the AK-47, or was the AK-47. And we know that the AK-47 came with which party in this country? Now, so my question is, what is the EFF going to do to make sure that they do collect all those guns that are still in rural areas of this province, that are still in the yards of these people that are killing each other, especially in the ruling government?
Okay, thank you so much. Question in the front here.
Ngibonge Sakina, ngizokhuluma likaphunga noMageba. Siyezwa bayakhuluma about indaba ye-land and all that. Kodwa esifisa ukwazi thina as women forward ukuthi kwenzeka kanjani ukuthi abantu besifazane kuyona yonke indaba khuluma land amakhanda wabonayo amakhanda abantu besilisa kuphela kuyona yonke lento abekhulumayo bazoba involve nini abantu besifazane kuyona yonke le ndaba ekhulunywayo yomhlaba. Sifuna ukubona abantu besifazane bekhuluma ngomhlaba ngoba ibona abatshalayo, ibona abaletha ukudla emakhaya ngokomhlaba, ibona ufuna abadiscussa indaba yomhlaba.
Okay.
Singicela ukubuza lapha kumama kwi-women forward ukuthi yena njenge-woman forward bazokwenza kanjani endabeni ezomhlaba ukuthi abafazi bakwazi ukuthi bakhulumeleke bakwazi ukubonakala.
All right, got you. And then one more question here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Manelo Shozi. I'm from an NGO or an NPO called CHIGA Foundation. My question will be directed to all the panelists in front of us, and thank you for coming to address us as Umzumbe community. I've got two questions, in fact. The first one is that as the society, the civil societies, what are you as political parties, if you are given a chance to govern, because all of you are contesting to rule the country, what are you promising to do in assistance to the NPOs and to the NGOs and co-ops without looking which political party they are affiliated to?
Okay.
What are you all doing in that regard?
Okay, let's limit it to that. We'll come to another round of questions. Let's take one for now. All right, let's run through answers, short and sharp. Thanks so much to the people on the floor for at least getting to the point as speedily as they can. But I'm going to ask the leaders to do the same as well in answering those questions. All right, let's start with the clarity, ANC, on how you are going to actually deal with youth beneficiation, because I said the first question I think you have already addressed in the opening salvo, speaking to political killings. So youth and youth benefits from all of these political machinations. How are you going to deal with that?
Well, I think one of the issues that has to be addressed, you see, the problem of unemployment faces mostly young people in our country. And many of them have begun with initiatives that are supported by government, but in many instances you find that they do not have a land or a place where they can be able to pursue their dreams as a small, medium business entrepreneurs. And I think one of the things that needs to be addressed quite effectively is how should we ensure that in the redistribution of the land, there is an allocation that is intended to encourage the participation of young people, particularly those who are aspirant business people and who are working as entrepreneurs or in SMMEs. I think that's one of the areas that will have to be addressed. Of course, the issue of human settlement will also be a factor that affects young people. But in the main, I think it's about how young people should have access to land for their own development. On the second issue about what we do with the NGOs and NPOs, I think the question could be, have we done enough or not? Because the legislation at the moment, and through various departments, but particularly the Department of Social Development, there's quite a great deal of work that is being done to support, to enhance the participation of NGOs and NPOs in various parts of our province. It may very well be that that assistance is not enough because you have too many NPOs and too many NGOs, which is also as a consequence of the fact that many people who do not have any formal employment become creative, which is correct, and would expect the democratic state to support them for their initiative to succeed. But a great deal of work is happening in our province. You can go anywhere across the province where a number of NPOs and NGOs have got support, both in terms of facilities that they make use of for their own objectives, but also in terms of the financial support that the state provide to them so that they succeed in their own objectives.
And let's move on to the Democratic Alliance. And there was an allegation about you acquiring some land illegally, if you can address that question. And in addition to that, there was also a question about a failure of the criminal justice system and how you intend to address that.
Yeah, look, firstly, I think in the issue of allegation, we'll be wasting time because it's a family issue, and if you know, there was never corruption there. He's just coming here to grandstand for the ANC. There was never any corruption. But if there was any corruption, he must go to a justice system and report. But coming back to the real issues here, it is true. Our justice system is failing us at times. However, it's around political will. We have seen from Zondo Commission that politicians at a senior level are the one manipulating our justice system, and it's evidence from Zondo Commission how even NPA has been used in the process. But the real issue here from the question was around the issue of basic services. As earlier you spoke about the issue of unfulfilled promises made by a government. To respond to that, I think one must say, if the current party who's in government will win election on the 8th of May, we as voters have to blame ourselves for that, because it's us who can bring change. It's us who can stop the ANC. After 25 years of democracy, they've been promising and making all these empty promises. Now it's up to us as voters to go and say, we have to bring change as voters, and we have to vote out the current government, which keep looting public funds. It's clear that corruption is stealing from the poor. Currently, many South Africans, more than 10 million South Africans, are unemployed. Why? Because we have a challenge on our economic growth. Our economy is not growing to a level where we can create fair access to jobs. There's a problem we are facing. But also, if you go back to the issue of procurement processes, tenders are awarded to specific elite connected to the ruling party. Now, how then you can spread economy? Because we have to talk about freedom versus economy. Currently, the majority of South Africans are still outside the mainstream economy. Why? Because of the current policies that seek to benefit the elite at the expense of the majority of South Africans who are sidelined. Typical example, when I talk about political will, here in Ogu, where we are, the MEC, they had a protest and had a petition against water problems. They came to legislature with a petition. The MEC for Kokta tear that petition in front of the community at legislature. There's an issue of the politicians who are so arrogant, not willing to listen to the voters, not willing to listen to the communities. There's a problem we're facing. We have a corruption in this province. The MEC herself have came out and said, while people are saying we need water, we were given the money for draft relief. And it was 400 million. And 200 million, the MEC herself came out and said, 200 million is missing.
Yeah,
how can you say?
Do we know what happened to that money, by the way?
Now, that's a question we're saying, where the money went. You can't come and say the money is missing. We've been asking questions. What do you mean the money is missing? There's no response to that. It shows you the level of corruption in this province, where there's no political will even from the premier himself to deal with the issue of corruption in this province.
Okay, I must admit, I kind of left that story off at the question where what happened to the money. But IFP, your question was also centered around the criminal justice system and its failures.
Thanks, Sakina. So far, what has come out of the investigations, the commissions that are investigating the ANC, is that I'm saying investigating the ANC because no other party has appeared there. And all the stories coming out about the ANC, this, the ANC, that. What has come out is clear that one, we must, as a country, stop cadre deployment. People must be appointed and be employed in positions on the basis of capacity and ability. That is what the IFP will do. Because these people who are put there because they are cadres, they are comrades and they are friends, then they are manipulated. Somebody elsewhere is then remote controlling them into what to do. And secondly, there must be honesty in governance. There must be respect for the rule of law. There must be trustworthiness. And these are all the aspects that the IFP has. So we are saying to the people, they must trust us that we'll fix the justice system of the country, because there will be no cadre deployment. There will be honesty. There will be integrity in governance. There will be clean governance. And we are also saying, Sakina, on the issue of the partnership with the NGOs, the IFP respects NGOs very, very much. We will partner with them. We will not do like what the current government is doing, of crippling NGOs and switching off the flows of finances to them. NGOs are very important. They stay with the people. They are in touch with the people. So we'll form a very strong partnership with NGOs, because even before 1994, the KwaZulu government, erstwhile, was working with NGOs. And then we had very, very good service delivery in our communities. So we'll do the same. We'll go back to pre-1994, partner with NGOs, deliver services, and have NGOs also, because, they empower you. In the areas where you are not strong, where you are weak, where you don't know, they come up with information and they help you as government. A government that sidelines NGOs is not a strong government. A strong government will always partner with communities, because NGOs are communities.
Okay, and interestingly, just to note before I move on to the others, both questions around the criminal justice system and its failures, your emphasis was very much on the political aspects of it, and what's going on in that sphere, as opposed to ordinary people and the troubles that they are having with accessing justice through this particular system, because you have so many people languishing in holding cells, finding themselves in jail simply because they could not afford bail for one. Some of them simply are going in for stealing food to eat, whereas people are looting millions and billions of rands in this country and they walk scot-free every day. You've had your turn. I was just making the point based on your responses there. Let me come to the EFF. Illegal firearms, what are you going to do about that?
It's very simple why these illegal firearms are still here. We know where they come from and we know who they are sitting with. There's never been any deliberate attempt by government to recover those. Our justice system, from the police through to the courts, is messed up, deliberately so that you end up with so many people that are sitting in jail, as you have alluded earlier on, because Bosasa must have a tender. They must count heads and say, we've bought so many loaves of bread to feed so many people, we've procured so much security to secure them. They then bill government. Then government pays them, and then they bribe this ANC lot here, as we have had it in the State Capture Commission. Our justice system is being sabotaged deliberately. But in terms of removing the firearms from communities, we need to ensure that the police do their job. We need to ensure that those that are found with this armed cache are dealt with accordingly. We need to make sure that the IFP in particular and the ANC in particular are held to account as to where are those guns that they used to kill each other. We cannot pass that stage, because those guns are still there. They were never collected. There was never a deliberate attempt to collect them. Let me make an example what the ANC government
and given that so much time has elapsed since the dawn of democracy, how do you propose going about that? Because how are you going to, assuming that, of course, what you are saying is accurate, how do you propose to do this at this point, now that you've had at least 25 years into a new dispensation of arms that the person who asked the question says people had buried in their backyards? I've heard similar stories over the years. But how are you going to do this?
It's very simple. A specialized unit of the police must be set up to track those firearms. An AK-47 can live with you for hundreds of years. And the R5s and the G3s that were preferred weapons of the IFP and the AK-47s that were preferred weapons of the ANC are still there, buried in some crawls and some homestead. Go to Msinga. In Msinga, they will be selling dagga and using AK-47 to defend their own dagga. It is known where those firearms are. There's no political will from government to go and collect those firearms. Set up a specialized tracking unit that must find those guns. The ANC leadership is still here. The IFP leadership, they are still here. They must account. Philip Powell, let me tell you, the guy that was the main collector and supplier of arms to the IFP, training them. We can go back to Caprivi, etc., was given free passage by Madiba's government to go and stay somewhere in exile. He is never accounted for the arms caches that he hid. Both these guys must come to account.
All right. Let's come to the women forward with regard to the land question once again. And of course, women's voice and representation in this regard.
Sakina, I'm going to allow the gentleman here to continue dealing with the issues of arms and firearms and violence and all of that. Women are proposing a shared future. While they fight, while they do what they do, women are going to make sure that we have a shared future where all South Africans live and work together. South Africa needs 3 times its economy to absorb the people who are not working right now. We need the NGOs. Thank you, young men, for bringing that one. We need corporates who actually have trillions sitting in the banks to invest in our communities where there is plight and poverty, where people need to work. So while everything else is going on, and I appreciate it, I think it's important for us to actually have level heads that are going to make sure that while people are fighting on the side, we are feeding people, we are making sure that they go to school, we make sure that life goes on so that they grow and become the people they were meant to become, in spite of everything that is actually happening. Thank you.
And this is why it's always great to have a different voice among the others, and the women coming in there saying that they will keep the home fires burning and make sure that the nation continues to thrive whilst the men are fighting about the arms caches and whatever happened to them. But, talking about some of the statistics regarding this particular province, of course you have almost 20% of the country's population resided in KwaZulu-Natal, 11.3 million people. That's about 19.7% of South Africa's total population, and this is as of September last year. And also just looking at some of the other stats, social grant recipients in this province, 3.8 million, or 22% of the overall share nationally of social grant recipients reside in this province. You have the narrow definition, according to the narrow definition of unemployment, the unemployment rate in this province stands at 25.6%, and by the expanded definition, it's at 41.3%, and it is unacceptably high, and it will explain a lot of some of the socio-economic and also some of the psychosocial issues that this particular province has to contend with. Okay, I'm going to factor those answers into your opportunity when they come around next, because I want to take another round of questions from the floor. And again, just your name for us and then your question, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zime from Women Forward. I would like to pose a question to Ms. Nanangobese. Nanangobese, how are you going to support us as you're coming on board in terms of the crime in our community, in terms of the rape in our community? We're facing a very big problem where our kids are being raped, where our grandmothers and mothers are fearful of to stay in their communities. How are you going to support the ruling government in terms of that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next question.
Thank you very much. My name is Mkhuleko Hlenga from the IFP. Just 2 quick things, Sakina, because I'm seeing Mr. Khoza very much passionate about the issue of guns and violence, and with his misplaced views. But let's fast forward it to his own conduct when he was the councillor in eThekwini, and the violence which happened under his watch and xenophobic attacks in Albert Park, one of the reasons why he's no longer in the ANC. So those in glass houses should not throw stones. It's a sensitive matter, and none of us should play cheap politics about it. To Honorable Kaula of the IFP, I want to just say one of the challenges in this country is the skills mismatch. We are producing, we've got an education system that is not creating the necessary skills, knowledge and expertise needed by the job market. And so what is the IFP plan from basic education right up to higher education and training for an education system which is going to be an economics and jobs driver so that we can actually improve the lives of our people? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much, Sakina. My name is Mhlengilu Thuli from the ANC. My question goes to the Provincial Secretary of the African National Congress. How does the ANC intend to transform the economy in serving everyone, advancing social transformation, and rebuilding and renewing a capable and development state? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Next question.
Well, thank you, Sakina. Sibonelo again. Now, this time it's in the view of the education system to all the political parties. The education system at high school level, the pass rate is 30%. And at higher education, tertiary, it's 50%. And they are busy proposing a 65% pass rate. Now, we're having a situation here where a learner at high school is relaxed because I'm going to get 30% and pass, move to a next grade. And at higher education, in order to be admitted at varsity or at tertiary, you must be able to get 50% and 65%. Because in order to get a university or your bachelor's, you must have at least 2 level 7s. Now, if you cannot achieve that in high school, how are you going to be able to access free education? What is your plan as the political parties to make sure that between high school education and higher education, there is synergy? This informs one another so as to produce young people who are able to compete in this universe, because we are crying now saying there are people coming from outside of our country with skills, but we don't have skilled people within our country because they complete their matrics, they cannot access higher education. Okay. What is your plan to ensure that education system is better? Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you, Sakina. My name is Bongumusa Ntlabati. My question goes directly to the future Premier of KZN, Zwagele Mngcango. Two things that Zwagele has mentioned, two things that the future Premier has mentioned is that one of the DA promises is to speed up basic service delivery, and the other one is fighting corruption. But I'd like to know what is the DA's plan in terms of this province regarding those two. I'll use one example, Sakina. Here at Ugu, we have an issue with water. And another issue is that Ugu District Municipality is proposing to increase tariffs by 22%, and the DA has been actually protesting against that. But I'd like to find out from the future Premier, what are his plans regarding those two? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And is there another question? Before I get answers. Yes, please continue, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kwenza Ucele from the EFF. My question is directed to our chair, the chair of the province, Babu Khoza. I heard when we are going around meeting with people, most of their concern is about that they are dependent on the grant. So now, most of the time when you go there, the political parties, when they are campaigning, they promise that the social grant will be taken away if another political party comes in. So what is the stand on the EFF on the political grant issue? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's answer those questions. Let's run through it, and let's start with Women Forward. The question of crime, the question of rape that has reached crisis proportions in this country, even leading to some people describing it as a rape culture.
Desperate situations require serious measures to counter. Women Forward is very decided about the issue of violence and rape in this country. And we are aware that we cannot advocate for the death penalty, although we would have loved that. Only yesterday, we saw an 11-month-old that was raped by a 27-year-old. Something gruesome, and I think that child has died. Now, under normal circumstances, that person should have actually been hanged or whatever, killed in jail. As a better, what do you call it, is the second option, Women Forward, for such crimes, we are advocating castration. It has to be implemented. Simply because it will start making people think twice before they do such acts on other human beings. It's totally unacceptable that South Africa has actually decided that it's normal for people to die from rape or to die from violence and there are no consequences. Next to that is that we have realized that most of the people who are repeat offenders, like repeat rapists, are the people who come back and continue raping because our prison systems is not a prison. Our systems are not working. You realize that even the person who is in prison, we spend close to about 350 rands a day for a person in prison, but a kid gets 340 rands a month in terms of the grants that they actually get. It doesn't make sense that we should spend about 11,000 rands looking after a person who has raped or who has killed in this country. That has to change. That actually has to change because we know that prison is big business, as we have seen with the Busasa case. People have been making money out of prison. Now, prisoners have to be like prisoners. They actually have to grow their own food. They actually have to build hospitals so that we don't have tenders to build hospitals and schools. So something has to change vis-a-vis the policy that deals with imprisonment of people who are continuous or serial offenders in this country, because it's not going to stop. We're not going to pussyfoot serious issues like that and not be decided about needs to actually happen. Therefore, Women Forward is saying castrate the serial rapists so that they set an example. Believe me, we won't actually castrate more than 3 people in this country and the rate will actually reduce drastically. Nobody wants to part with their private parts. So I think it's important for us to actually do something like that. But then when it comes to the issue of education, education is becoming outdated in a way we actually deal with it. Our children are very much fourth industrial type of kids. They no longer want to stay in class. They need to be equipped with the education that is going to make it easy for them to live in the world. Now, what we have not done in this country is to even equip the teachers with the ability to teach in that environment. And maybe the children will teach themselves if we allow them to see challenges as part of their school. You know, where people live in desperate areas, they come up with solutions, which is why we're saying community-based solutions are the ones that have a longer term in actually solving the problems in our areas. Therefore, what is important here is that communities become involved in making sure that their children have access to tools that are going to make them citizens that are useful to them, not to the corporates of South Africa, but for our social upliftment.
There's so much I wish to interrogate, but in the interest of time, I shan't, because I wonder, are our children actually fourth industrial revolution children? I would say absolutely not. We haven't reached that level of development. We don't understand. Our leaders don't understand what the fourth industrial revolution is about. It's about artificial intelligence. Our leaders talk fourth industrial revolution, but they are advocating a third industrial revolution solutions to it. And that for me has been very evident as we have traveled across the length and breadth of the country. But as I say, no time to interrogate all of those things right now. The IFP skills mismatch in education, and incidentally, Mr. Tlengwa, it was as if you actually saw that I marked this off on your manifesto, because I have all your manifestos here, and it was one of the things that I wanted to talk to, and the IFP stance on it, actually. So you actually asked a question that I had meant to ask. But IFP, what is your solution to that skills mismatch that we have in the country?
Thank you, Sakina. The problem of the country at the moment is that there is too much focus on quantity and not quality. It's good. It's good that we must have all our children going to school. But at the same time, this must go along with quality. We don't have quality education in South Africa. You pay for quality. If you have money, you receive quality education. If you are poor, you receive poor education. What the IFP is saying is, one, there must be a redress fund for all the provinces. Each province must use the redress fund to empower the schools of the people that were previously disadvantaged. Those are people in the rural areas, those are people in the townships. Schools there are still the same. The schools that we had before 1994 in the rural areas and in the townships are still the same as before 1994 today. So what we are saying is they must be improved. We must improve infrastructure so that we improve the quality. And secondly, we must improve the skilling of teachers themselves so that we have quality teachers in our schools. And there must be, enough teachers for our children so that you don't find a situation where even the PPN, we are saying it must be reviewed, because PPN in a rural area cannot be similar to a PPN in an urban area. People are moving away from rural areas. They are going to urban areas. You find out that schools in rural areas don't have enough teachers because the learners are few. The PPN is a problem. You find 2, 3 teachers teaching all the 6, 7 grades of the school. Then you are going to receive poor education. What we are saying as the IFP is that there must be proper management of the education system as a whole. Right from the principal, the HOD, to the circuits, to the district, there must be proper management so that each person is doing their job. You don't want a situation where the principal becomes a messenger of the circulars from the office. Principals must manage the schools at their site in school. What we are saying as the IFP is that there must be proper pay for the teachers. Teachers must be properly compensated. And we are saying that, like my brother Shows was saying, this feel-good syndrome of a 30% pass, let's do away with that, because it accumulates to poor transition from high school level to tertiary level. When they get to tertiary level, then they become very poor because we wanted to say we passed so many. This 30% issue, we must review it as a country. And lastly, Sakina, there must also be the empowerment of the teachers themselves, even teachers who are already in the system. Our education system has been changing. It has changed now about 6 or 7 times from 1994. But teachers, most of them are still those very same teachers. How are we going to get to that 4th industrial revolution when it must be driven by teachers who were educated 30 years ago and they have not been empowered through the current scenarios of education internationally? Thank you.
Not entirely true, though, because teachers are being constantly upskilled. As a matter of fact, they are being sent. We can debate the efficacy of the programs, but it is not true that nothing is being done. But I take your point about perhaps expecting too much from teachers who have been in the system perhaps for a very long time and maybe not having the necessary skills to acquire the type of education that you are trying to get to.
That is where the mismatch comes from.
But you see also the 30% question, and it would be remiss of me, where's the gentleman, not to address that question. I think, this is one of those lies that were allowed to run a mile before we caught on. There is no learner in South Africa that is going to go to university with a 30% pass. It's not going to happen.
It's in a subject, Sakina. It's not the average
You
pass.
are not going to get into any university with any 30% pass on your report card. It's not happening. It's one of those things, and we have failed. Leadership has failed to actually place that in its proper context, because there are various levels of tertiary admission. So when you're talking about a bachelor's pass, you are not going to get in with a 30% pass. That is the cream of the crop. And those children, trust me, they know what they need to achieve to get into university. And then, of course, you have other institutions of higher learning petering down until you get to your TVET level, where there are children who are struggling, and this is perhaps where they will find expression for some sort of further education. But I think as a country, we need to rectify that misconception that we labor under, that people can get a 30% pass and go to a university. It does not happen. It's not possible. So just to park that there and just to give clarity on that matter. But let me move on, because again, I have so many questions for the things you are saying, but I'm not going to ask. The economic freedom fighters, the issue of, or rather this was for the ANC, the question of economic and social transformation. Yeah. What are you going to do about that?
Well, firstly, I'm glad you have clarified the misconception, because that's where I was going, that the education, it's not everybody who goes through the education system is intended to be later on at the university. In many instances, there are people who go through our education system whose primary focus is to end with TVET colleges and various other initiatives which are intended to empower them to pursue their dreams, that the dreams that they may have identified earlier on, the dreams that the things that are really suitable for them, for which they are capable to perform on. And that's the issue that I wanted to raise, because I heard that even the IFP was going on and on about this matter, and I was worried that we may not have an opportunity to correct it because it's not true. The second issue, SK, the issue about firstly, we need to grow the economy. I think they start there. A major part of our challenge in this country, which the situation got worse with the 2008 economic meltdown, which was not only a South African unique problem, it was an international situation. Of course, it impacted on our own setting in a certain way, much more different than other economies of our equal size or even those that are bigger than our own economy. But it has had an impact. It has contributed to the reproduction of inequality, unemployment, and poverty in our society. But what the ANC says needs to be done, firstly, invest in the infrastructure of our country. There is more than 2 trillion rand that is designated for investment in infrastructure. In the course of that investment, ensure that at least 30% of that economy is allocated to small businesses, which is obviously businesses that in many instances are owned by the previously disadvantaged section of our population. When you do that, you are transforming the economy. But in our own case here in KZN, you may recall, if you are aware of this, 2-3 years ago, the government launched what was called Operation Vula. The intention of that project is to ensure that where you have schools, you see schools where they are providing nutrition for our kids, and hospitals where also they are providing food for the patients who are there in the hospital. The approach that was adopted by government is that in each and every district, let's have a district agent, and let's coordinate and mobilize the co-ops which are owned by many of our people who do not have the ability to enter into the mainstream economy, to have a share in the government procurement through provision of services such as foods, fruits, and any other kind of meal that is required by both the schools and the hospital, for them to work together, form into cooperatives, submit that to the school, so that the government can then channel some of the resources that usually are going to big companies in this country, channel them to the small business people so that they also acquire the capital muscle, which will grow them to become better in the near future. So the intention is that let's find a way through the state procurement, because you can't force the private sector to do an investment. You can persuade them to partner with the state. Of course, to do so requires that you must create an environment that is conducive for investment to take place, which is why the ANC-led government is intervening in all areas where there are challenges that are threatening business confidence or investment into the economy of our country. The last issue I want to comment on, I'm hearing that there is a concern about the commissions being commissions of inquiry about the ANC. The fact of the matter is that over the past 25 years, in our country, the government is led by the African National Congress. The problems and the challenges we've encountered over the past period will inevitably, to a larger extent, be as a consequence of some of our own comrades who have been involved in the state and the running of the state affairs. But the ANC has been very bold and courageous to say that we can't hide our heads on the sand and say, because these issues might raise problems that are going to confront the African National Congress, we must run away and not raise them. We are raising them, they're on the table. Those who have got information are invited to appear before the Commission of Inquiries and ventilate whatever information at their disposal.
Okay.
The essence of the matter is that we must find a solution. There are challenges, there are success stories which we'll explain later on SK. There are good stories in this country. That is why people will continue to vote for the ANC, but there are challenges and we're confronting the challenges.
We are running out of time, but I must just say, you talk about spending 2 trillion rand. The ANC-led government has already spent 2 trillion rand in infrastructure projects in the last 10 years. Where is the economic growth as a result of that? Just a point as an aside.
Okay.
Let me move on. EFF, answer your question, please.
Yeah, our question was on the grant. We must make it very clear that social grants is not ANC money. It's people's money, it's tax money. So they mustn't come here and pretend as if they're doing people favors by giving them grants. And the EFF is saying that, yes, people's money, the money that is being paid now on grants is very little. You can't do anything about it. Just his food for his dog is more than what they propose a child must be fed with, which is nothing. So EFF says, let us double all the grants across the board. The next question will be to say, where is the money coming from? The money is going to come because it's there. It's gone through corruption. So for you to be able to get the money, get rid of all the provincial governments and their duplications, take all their budgets, empower our people, create sustainable jobs and a better life and infrastructure so that all of them, the ministers and the MECs, must lose their jobs. You only need the national government and local government, full stop. You don't need anything in between, times 9.
Well, very interesting, because if we look at social grants, in 1994, there were 3 million people receiving social grants in this country. At the end of 2017, you had 17.5 million people on social grants in this country. And that is something to think about, because what does that say about where the solutions may lie? But unfortunately, that's all we have time for. It is 2 o'clock. Time flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? Didn't I get to the DA question?
No, there was no question for DA.
Next elections.
No.
Next elections.
The question on corruption, I think it was, there were 2 issues that were raised. Yes, please answer. Yeah.
I think it's very important,
They're all
Sakina.
corrupt.
Yeah.
It's very important, Sakina, because you have to get rid of corruption by ensuring that on our procurement processes, we are transparent. By ensuring that those who are found to be corrupt are actually jailed, not sent to parliament as ANC is doing. We have to be clear that we have this allusion in the country that says only Zuma was corrupt, but Musa is showing that even Ramaphosa is more corrupt even than Zuma. Now we have to deal with corruption because it's a very serious issue. Don't talk of issue of you spoke about the issue of population in this province. The challenge we are facing is we have an influx of illegal immigrants in this province. That is why we are saying we have to secure our borders.
Stop your xenophobia.
Remember, the reason why we can't even deal with the issue of basic services is the fact that you've got a higher population not counted in this province. You've got more people who are not part of the states you are talking about, who are actually illegal immigrants in this province, coming from nearest borders. There's a problem. We're saying we must secure our borders so that we ensure that services are able to go to our people.
All right. And thank you so much to everybody who came through. Thanks so much to our panel. Thanks to our panel, the Women Forward represented by Nana Ngobese, EFF's Vusi Khoza, ANC Mtumiseni Ntuli, the DA was represented by Zwakele Mngango, and IFP by Mtomutle Kaula. Thank you so much to everybody, and to everybody who participated as well. And that's where we're going to leave it for today.